Our next panel is on the state of water, which should be really interesting, especially given the comments on the last panel about how maybe our water quality is decreasing. Anyway, the panel is moderated by Linda Breggin. Linda is a senior attorney with Environmental Law Institute, and she's also the founder of the Environmental Law and Policy Review here at Vanderbilt. So, Linda, thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. And thanks to the EELU program in particular, Ann Davis and Caroline Cox and Maggie Milam and Ethan Thorpe. It takes a lot to put these together. And I think this is just a really valuable conference, as you can tell, by a really impressive turnout. So thank you so much for doing this. And welcome to the State of Water panel. Mike gave us a really nice segue into this panel. I'm really delighted to be moderating this today because the role that states play in water quality protection is so important. And I can only say that against the current backdrop of reduced federal regulation and dramatically reduced federal funding, that the state role is just going to be increasingly important. And we are fortunate to have an all-star group of speakers here today to talk about the current state of water and also what to look for moving forward. So I'm going to do very brief introductions that don't come close to doing justice to their biographies, and then we're going to open it up for questions. We have plenty of time for the audience to engage, and I have a lot of questions for you all as well. So let me start with Jenny Howard, who is the Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel for the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, or TDEC as we call it, and she is part of TDEC's 5-person executive team. She previously served as TDEC's General Counsel, Deputy General Counsel, and Senior Counsel for Legislative Affairs, and prior to joining TDEC, she was an Assistant Metropolitan Attorney for the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. She has also worked in private practice with a large firm representing clients in both litigation and transactions. She earned her law degree and certificate in law and business from, of course, Vanderbilt Law School. Okay, great to have you back. Mekayle Houghton is the Executive Director of the Cumberland River Compact. She joined the Compact in 2005 and has been the Executive Director since 2014. Ms. Houghton led the organization to develop 2 significant fee-for-service programs in stream restoration and urban ecological restoration. She also built a partnership with the City of Nashville to launch Route Nashville, which many of you are probably familiar with. She serves on the River Network Board of Directors and numerous state and local advisory boards, including Tennessee H2O, the state's water planning initiative. She holds a bachelor and master's degree from the University of Chicago, my alma mater, where fun goes to die, it's true, right? And Mr. Nolan is the director of the Tennessee office of the Southern Environmental Law Center. He is a native of Tennessee. He has practiced law here in Nashville for over 30 years. Before joining SELC, George litigated complex tort and commercial lawsuits throughout Tennessee. George's litigation practice with SELC focuses primarily on water protection. He received his law degree from the University of Virginia and his undergraduate degree from the University of Tennessee. So as you can tell, we have an all-star panel. And George, I know you literally were running from the legislature up here today, so thank you for squeezing this in. And Jenny, I think you're going to start us off.
It's great to be here. It's great to see so many people interested, and I was really encouraged by the last panel, just hearing everybody's thoughts and how passionate people are about the topic. So it's great to be here. A little bit about TDEC. So we are an executive government agency in Tennessee, one of 23. My boss is the commissioner who reports to the governor as part of his cabinet. Agency-wide, we have about 2,800 people. We have offices across the state. Hopefully y'all visited our beautiful state parks and natural areas. And we have a $2.1 billion budget right now. So we're like the National Park Service and EPA combined on a state level. So this panel is about water. We obviously do a lot of things environmentally, but we're talking about water today. People in the office sometimes will say, well, it all ends up in the water. So even our programs like underground storage tanks, keeping gasoline out of groundwater, or our solid waste program, keeping landfill leachate out of groundwater, those they're related to water. But if you're just looking at our Division of Water Resources, which is our primary group that handles our state environmental program and our delegated federal programs, we have 364 employees and a $77 million budget for payroll and operational expenses. The types of things we do are train water plant operators. We issue permits for withdrawal from waters, discharge to waters, alterations of waters, construction permits, aquatic resource alteration permits, mining permits. We sample water, we sample fish tissue. We are the regulatory agency in Tennessee. We have to say we're a resource and a regulator. So where do we stand? The big question, where do we stand in Tennessee on our water? So I have two positive stats to share. U.S. News and World Report, they rank more than law schools. They ranked Tennessee number 2 for drinking water quality. So we're really happy to see that stat. They got that based on the Safe Drinking Water Act and a weighted point system tracking violations of 1,000 customers, so violations per 1,000 customers. So number 2 in drinking water quality. Memphis ranked number 1 in cleanest drinking water according to waterfilterguru.com. So they sampled 70 cities and it came back that on pH, alkalinity, hardness, and total dissolved solids that Memphis had our cleanest drinking water. And if you've been to Memphis and had their tap water, it's great and an important resource for us to protect. So there is positive news on drinking water, and the last panel talked a little bit about where are we on water. I heard comments about we're doing worse. I have a hard time pinning the scientists down in our office because they always have an answer on, well, that's because we changed the way we assess the water, and so now our assessment is a little different, or that we're assessing different things, or it's different how we're assessing it. So I would say it's kind of a mixed answer, but I would encourage people to go to page 17 through 21 of the State of Environment, which talks a lot about our water and doing some of those comparisons. So the state government view on this topic, thinking about how to express it. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from the governor's State of the State. State of the State is an address that the governor gives to the legislature when you kick off the legislative session. And so in January, Governor Lee said, "From the Delta to Appalachia, Tennessee is blessed with natural abundance that we have to protect and preserve for future generations. Yet we also continue to be one of the fastest growing states in the nation in rural and urban areas alike. So how do we balance record growth with a plan to protect our natural resources? You start by rejecting conventional wisdom that says you cannot do both. To grow Tennessee, we have to conserve Tennessee." And so that's it's kind of a mantra that we've talked about. I've even seen versions of it on the federal level, where the current administration is saying things like, if you have an economic stake in this country, you better have an environmental stake in this country. So kind of that concept of if you want to grow, you care about growth, you really do need to care about the environment, you need to conserve the environment. So what more specifically is going on in Tennessee? My boss likes to say we're a victim of our own success. So we have beautiful natural resources, we're business friendly, we're number 15 in 2024 in population growth. We now have over 7 million people. In 2022, we hit a record for migration to Tennessee. But that obviously presents a lot of concerns for our waters. So we're going to have more runoff, going to be more impervious surfaces. We are one of the top states for loss of agriculture land. With fertilization, pet waste, sedimentation from active development, loss of riparian buffers, that what slows down that runoff, and the contaminants are not dropping out, they get into our streams. We're losing stream canopy, which relates to the temperature of the water, increased nutrients and algal growth, drain on infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants need expansions. There's just a lot of pressure from development. So. Let's see. I'm going to take a volleyball stuff. So speed up here. Back to kind of the point on where we stand on water. There's a lot of information on our website if you ever want to look. For instance, one of the things I looked at is complaints. How are complaints trending? In 2012, we had 1,500 complaints. 150 of those turned out to be real violations where we'd be doing enforcement work with the landowner. Last year, we had over 2,500 complaints, 700 of which were violations that required us to move forward. So, well, it's kind of hard to say across the state, exactly where we are. You can obviously look at individual water resource. So, for instance, I live not far from here, about 2 miles from here, kind of the Green Hills area, and I have the West Fork of Browns Creek in my backyard. So you can go and look at the 303D list, which is Tennessee's list of impaired waters, and you can see that the West Fork of Browns Creek is impaired for nitrates and nitrites and total phosphorus, E. coli, and I know it's not a happy thing. Siltation, sedimentation, and where those impacts are coming from being a high-density area, from sanitary sewer overflows, flushing system failures, other things like that. So I'll direct you to the 303D list. Now the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn it over, so what are we going to do about the fact that there's all of this development and we have to start taking conservation measures? I want to highlight one conservation measure that we recently took, and I'll read again from the governor's State of the State from January. He said, "Our state is home to the most biologically diverse freshwater river in all of North America. The Dept River is a scenic natural treasure. It is also the sole water source for more than 2,500 Tennesseans who live in one of the fastest growing regions in the country. This presents a complex problem. That is why I signed an executive order in November to preserve the Dept, and that is why our budget will propose $100 million to create a regional water supply strategy that will solve this problem once and for all." So the governor's budget also includes $24 billion, which will be used for a comprehensive water resource management plan. So what excites me about something like this is that we can take this money and this time, we can really focus on the Dept before we lose it, before we're you've heard horror stories and seen horror stories in states. I love that we're trying to get ahead of this, preserve the Dept, and then create a model that we can go across the state with our watersheds and protect them. With that, I used too much of my time, so I'll turn it over. Thanks.
You're good. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm the Executive Director of the Cumberland River Compact. We're a private environmental nonprofit, so our funding comes from a combination of sources. Foundation, individual, corporate, as well as government funding. And if we do our job well and communicate to the general public, we are a very positive, optimistic, inclusive, non-judgmental environmental nonprofit. Behind that presentation to the public is a lot of really clear thought about how we execute our mission of improving water quality in the Cumberland River Basin and its tributaries. And a lot of that thought derives from the research being done at Vanderbilt. It's a lot of identity politics in Tennessee. So, personally, I may feel certain ways, but in a professional public presentation, it's very open, very friendly. Our programs are designed to address the root causes of water pollution. So if you have glanced through this report, you'll see that agriculture is one of the primary sources of water pollution in Tennessee. It's largely unregulated, so we go to farmers in our working lands program. Caroline Hutchins is here someplace who runs our working lands program, and she does a lot of work with farmers. We also do work on abandoned mine land, which are also in kind of a gray legal zone as far as water quality. And we encourage those folks to adopt practices that will improve water quality, improve the water that's running off their lands and into our streams. So it's hard, it's a hard job to do, and really all credit to Caroline for growing that program. We talk a lot about crop yield and how adopting more environmental practices will improve your yield and your profitability, things like that. Another program that we have is Urban Waters, and that is run by Jason Sproles, who's here. And that includes both our DPAVE and Route Nashville. And that is taking this built environment, mostly of Nashville, that's very hardscaped. So any rain that falls is carrying pollution straight to our streams. And what Jason and through his work and his team are trying to do is create spaces in this urban environment for water to sink into the ground so that before it reaches the stream, it's clear, it's cool, and it's clean. Otherwise, we're just taking all that hot pollution to the water and we lose the habitat that we have in our urban streams. Catherine Price is here. She runs our education and engagement program. We're educating people of all ages on what we need to do to get clean water. So it's exciting to see these little citizen scientists popping up all over the basin. And then we have a stream restoration program that's pretty robust. Stevens Valley is probably the closest stream restoration program that we've done. We also took out a dam at Sam Davis Memorial Home. Sam Davis, boy hero of the Revolution.
Just looking at me.
The Confederacy. I know, my kids wrote all kinds of essays on Sam Davis. Boy hero of the Confederacy, yes. So we took out the dam at that property, and that was fun. We were sued by historians, and we said, no, we're restoring it to pre-conditions. Yeah, so that's the range of the programming that we do. It all addresses non-point source pollution, which is a source that's largely unregulated, which comes from all of us. We all have a role to play in cleaning our water. I think that, to back up another step, what we believe is if we're successful, people will elect people to keep our water clean. Because ultimately the laws are kind of the last backstop on our clean water. And so, we talk a lot, we're very friendly faces, but we always say, go vote, go vote. And I think that certainly, if I were to be honest, I would say this is a time of kind of crisis thinking, questioning, is this the right approach? Have we been successful? Because, I think people can say that they value clean water, but if they're not voting for clean water, then I don't know if people value clean water.
No, that was a little bit of a harsh note. And so, George, I'm sure you're going to have some very uplifting news from the legislature.
Thanks. Well, everybody, I'm George Nolan, and I'm the director of the Tennessee office of the Southern Environmental Law Center. And for those who might be unfamiliar with SELC, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan public interest law firm and environmental advocacy organization. What that means is that we're a big group of lawyers with offices throughout the southeastern United States, and we work very hard to try to use legal tools in a variety of advocacy contexts to protect our natural treasures. And one of our best water lawyers here in Tennessee is my colleague Stephanie Biggs, who's here with me, and she turned me on to a quote about water quality recently, which is that water quality starts on the land. And I think as we ask ourselves, why is water quality in Tennessee declining? I mean, there's no question that when you look at the statistics from TDEC that are gathered under Section 303D of the Clean Water Act about how our streams and rivers are doing, the quality is declining. And I think that is directly related to how we're using the land. And we, as we all know and feel, I think, are experiencing development pressures in our state that really are unprecedented. And there are there's if you want to degrade the quality of a river or stream, I think the most efficient way to do that is to build something really big right next to it. And what we are seeing in our office is that as our state experiences these development pressures, it's really hard to manage. Because at a fundamental level, we're talking about controlling human appetites. And it's very important that growth be managed wisely. And what we're seeing is that there are many efforts in our state legislature to kind of remove the guardrails that govern how we use the land, how we develop, and specifically the impact on our water quality. So I just came over here from the legislature where I and several other people testified against a piece of legislation that is pending that would largely deregulate wetlands in Tennessee. So I think, as many of you know, wetlands are a feature of our natural landscapes that are absolutely critical to water quality. And that's because they modulate how water moves through the land and how it connects with our groundwater systems. If we look at a pretty creek or a stream on a sunny day and it's flowing, but it's not raining, and we ask ourselves, how's that happening? Well, that's because there's a groundwater system that is charging the flow of that particular stream. And our wetlands connect with that groundwater system and allow that water to move where it needs to be so that we have drinking water supplies. And they also allow that water to go down into our drinking water aquifers. And while that process happens, wetlands clean the water because they really act like natural filters. So it's really important that we protect our wetlands, and currently we have laws that do protect those wetlands and provide developers with a financial incentive to avoid their destruction. But there was a bill introduced to change the way Tennessee regulates its wetlands. And it basically would make it much easier for wetlands to be destroyed and would really impact more than 300,000 acres of wetlands in Tennessee. It's a bill that is sponsored by a representative named Kevin Vaughn, who's a real estate developer from Shelby County in Collierville. And it's been moving through our legislature. So this morning we had a hearing before the Senate Energy, Agricultural, and Natural Resources Committee, and we put up a good fight. Several people spoke very eloquently against the bill, but unfortunately it moved through along party lines and appears to be advancing. So I just think it's important for everyone to appreciate that the laws that the laws our legislature is being asked to consider are largely informed by lobbyists and outside interests that are asking our lawmakers to carry bills that have tremendous implications. And I think some of the lawmakers don't really get the implications of what they're actually voting on. There was a recent U.S. Supreme Court case called Sackett versus EPA that dramatically rolled back the scope of our federal protections for wetlands. And that case was litigated by an organization called the Pacific Legal Foundation. They were on the side of pro-property rights and anti-wetlands protection. And that same group has now come to Tennessee and is helping support legislation like the one that I was just describing. And there's a couple other bills I think I'd like to flag for the group. There is legislation that would change significantly how we govern our sewage disposal infrastructure. There's, one of the challenges for developers, I think, is to build in areas where there is no sewer service. And here in Tennessee, sometimes developers turn to what's called drip dispersal sewage systems, which are basically these systems where a neighborhood is built out, everything is kind of plumbed into a common filtration type device, and then the sewage water is pushed into drip fields through PVC pipes, and the idea is that the soil will finish treating the sewage. And sometimes that works if it's designed well, but sometimes it doesn't work well at all. And so these systems really need to be carefully thought out, carefully designed, and if they're designed well, that can increase the cost of the development. And we're seeing legislation right now to kind of take off the guardrails around sewage disposal to allow developers to build things that aren't well designed. And that's another bill that we are pushing back against. And then I'll briefly mention a bill that's been referred to as the Sound Science Bill. And that's a piece of legislation that was brought here by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it sounds good. I mean, who's not in favor of sound science? But it basically would erect hurdles to regulatory rulemaking around the control of any type of chemical or substance. So we have engaged quite a bit on that bill. Several people in this room helped kind of put together a letter for our General Assembly members explaining the impact of that bill. And I think as a result of those collective efforts, the language of the bill has substantially improved. It's not perfect, but it's gotten a lot better. So I think that the thing I would close out with is it's just very important for all of us to pay attention to what's happening at the local level and develop relationships with our elected representatives and talk to them and help them pay attention to what they're doing.
Thank you, and I want to ask a quick follow-up, and then I know we have audience questions as well. You gave this wonderful explanation of why wetlands are important, and yet you noted they voted on party lines. And I'm curious whether you've seen a change in the last several years, and this goes to a point Mekayle made too about, how do you get people to engage civically and vote, right? But are you seeing a change where sort of facts matter less and party affiliation matters more, or has it always been this way?
There seems to be more tribalism going on. And I think there's a natural, environmental issues can be complicated. People's attention spans can be short. But I don't know what to say other than the votes that I've been seeing during this legislative session have been very much along party lines.
Nice,
We try to approach these issues in a very nonpartisan way.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important that we continue doing that. So we try not to be partisan about it.
And Mekayle, have you found any particular way of motivating people to vote on these issues?
I would say that as far as speaking to legislators, we trust SELC to do that. We have a lot better success rate than we would have talking to legislators. And then, you know, I think we continue to believe that we have a non-voter problem and that it's just a matter of getting more people to vote rather than trying to persuade and people with entrenched allegiances to change their vote.
Well, I know we want to take some audience questions. Professor Cox is back there with the microphone. And Ann, can I do a time check? And we started a little late. Do you still want us to wrap it too? Or?
Can you go five after?
That sounds great. All right, Carolyn.
Thank you. A couple of things. By the way, thank you for that analysis of the sound science and the sewage infrastructure. George, I appreciated that. A couple of things you didn't mention in the conversations that have been a concern to the Sierra Club. One is microplastic in our rivers. I understand that we're fourth in the nation, and that is a form of pollution. And the other is PFAS. The sewage applied to farmland got some discussion here, and I was glad to be updated on that. But sewage, raw sewage, contains PFAS. PFAS gets on farmland, it gets in the food, it gets in the groundwater, it gets in our bodies, and it gets in the rivers. I wondered if you'd care to
You want to just
comment a
explain
little
what
on that.
PFAS is? What it stands
Yeah, I can't remember what it stands for. It's Forever Chemicals. Go see, what's that movie, Dark Water with Mark Ruffalo? That'll help you give a common understanding of what PFAS is. But basically, they cause cancer, and we don't know how to get rid of them.
Thank you.
Thanks for that really great question. You know, I think the sound science bill that I mentioned is largely about PFAS. So, you know, these forever chemicals are everywhere and they're involved in so many manufacturing processes. And when you wash your clothes in the washing machine, PFAS is going down the drain. So it goes into the sewer systems. And one big challenging issue in Tennessee is, you know, what do we do with the sewage sludge that's created from our wastewater treatment plants? And SLC's approach to this to date has been to focus on trying to stop PFAS at the source. So there's many manufacturing processes that use these chemicals. And so some treatment plants that receive industrial waste take on a bigger load of PFAS than others. So what should be happening is that the wastewater treatment plants that kind of regulate the businesses that send stuff their way, they should be undertaking efforts to control these chemicals. So that work doesn't always, you know, it has not been able to solve the present problem of what do we do with all this sludge with PFAS in it. And this sludge is being spread across farmland as fertilizer. And I think the agricultural community is beginning to get worried about PFAS and tune in to the fact that it's a problem. And my impression of part of the motivation behind the sound science bill is to make it more difficult for TDEC to regulate chemicals like PFAS. And decide how to deal with it. It's not an easy problem to solve because it's so prevalent. And it's
And this might be
issue.
a good time to ask me, the prior administration was very focused on addressing PFAS, and cities that I talked to in the US Conference of Mayors was very concerned about the cost, right? And now we have a situation where federal funding is being cut, and I was wondering, Mekayle, if not only does it affect PFAS, it affects a lot of other things as well, and I was wondering if you might want to just comment on the impact you're already seeing from federal funds diminishing or being frozen, and what you see moving forward.
When I made my opening comments, I spoke about different funding to the Cumberland River Compact coming from 4 primary sources. One thing that we've discovered that we knew, but we've really discovered in the last 3 months is that a lot of foundations are actually pass-throughs of federal funding. So National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is actually a pass-through. It's a foundation, but it has a lot of money that comes from the US Forest Service. So when the OMB issued the memo freezing government grants, we received a memo from private foundations freezing our grants. So, we quickly made a list of the sources, what federal grants we had, even if they were passed through, what kind of risk we saw associated with each. The memo was rescinded, but functionally, the money is not there yet. And I think that's really important for people to know that, yes, the memo was rescinded, but it doesn't mean that the money was there and became available to draw down. So, for example, our grant funding through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is still frozen. So all the plans that Caroline and her team had made to reforest 100 acres of previously mined land. These are like mountaintop coal mines, that you've seen videos of that we're reforesting. All of those plans were canceled because NIFWIF isn't gonna send us money. We can't absorb all of that. So so there are those that are still pending or suspended. And then there are grants that are terminated. And this goes to what Ethan was saying in the earlier session about, vulnerable communities. So we had about $1 million in grant commitment to reforest hot, untreed neighborhoods in Nashville. Those neighborhoods, they are the previously redlined neighborhoods. I mean, you drive around Nashville, you know which neighborhoods don't have tree canopy. They're the poor neighborhoods that were redlined. It all, they have more asthma, they have, the streets are hotter, the water quality is poor, the air quality is poor. That was $1 million coming through various sources to plant urban canopy in those neighborhoods. That was terminated. So that was the immediate impact.
Yeah.
I don't know what the long-term impact is.
And I think the point you made is so important. A huge percentage of EPA's budget is just pass-through money to states. And, we've seen various forms of pushback, but I thought one of the more notable recently was that the associations of professionals who do water treatment, safe drinking water, wastewater treatment, they signed a letter to the EPA administrator saying, we really need this money to provide clean water to people. So it's gonna be interesting to see what the response is. I saw the continuing resolution that was passed still cut that funding. But I'll be curious because obviously the states have some sway and about half of them are Republican. So to be continued. I think we have a question over here.
I I actually don't know which way to go with this, but I think I'll go with the comment that was made about interaction with public officials. And I would urge the people in this audience to take a step and just call your state legislator. It takes 5 minutes. I work with Citizens Climate Lobby. This is one of our shticks, is to get our membership to call Congress at least once a month and talk to them about something that's environmentally related. Just out of curiosity, how many people in this room know who your state legislators are? Oh, yeah, I would suspect that we had self-selected into that group. Okay, how many of them are Republican? Do you know which party they're in? Okay, you're the target audience. Please call them. They need to hear. The second admonition is that here in Tennessee, and this is basing our labs, it's my opinion, the general election doesn't occur at the general election, it occurs during the primary election. And the major deficiency, at least in my opinion, is the relative number of people who vote in one versus the other. And if you're not voting in the Republican primary, then you're not voting, in my opinion. And one thing that I think the League of Women Voters urges is that Tennessee has an open primary law and that it be continued. And that's not anything to do with the question, is it? It's just an urging to the audience to do with it, but it has to deal with the follow-up on the comment you made about what do we do to get people in the legislature to start listening to us. So thank you, and I could make a comment about plastics, but I'm not gonna.
If you do have questions, raise your hands high, and as you're walking, I'll just ask, Jenny, you haven't gotten to talk much lately. Do you want to just give us some sense of what you think the priorities are for TDEC in the next couple of years in terms of advancing water quality?
So we talked about some federal funding and that being at risk, but some good news is at the end of the COVID funding around 2022, our office received $1.35 billion. And so we've been working really hard to make sure all of that goes to water and wastewater treatment across the state. So TASER is a group that we follow, it's a state government group that comes up with numbers. They say the need is $7 billion. I saw in Vanderbilt's report it estimates $5 to $15 billion, but there's a huge need that for our water and wastewater infrastructure to be upgraded in our state to keep millions of gallons of raw sewage from going into Cumberland if it rains hard. So that is something we're really focused on, and really proud of that. We didn't get any more people to do that. We didn't, we just had to make that happen really fast to get that money obligated. So we quickly got it all obligated and were able to work with local communities and have them do a scorecard. So we had the funding to incentivize them to really do an inventory of what do they have and what do they need. We prioritize, if you put money towards a red flag problem, we can give you more money, or you have to match less. And if you partner with a disadvantaged community, then we can do more with you. And if you partner at all, we can give you more money. And so that 1.35 billion has really helped because it's brought awareness locally to what the water and wastewater infrastructure problems are. And then it's also the community's also got federal money, so it's not just $1.35 billion, and so that's something we're really focused on, making sure that money presently we've not heard that any of that is at risk, so we're trying really hard to use all of it, get it all out the door, and our streams will be better for it.
If I can add, that was one of the highlights of that survey that I did of our funding when I called TDEC, and I'm like, do you have the money in Tennessee?
In hand.
And they're like, yes, because we're the recipient of some of that funding, and so, yeah, I have been really impressed with TDEC, as well as Metro Water, and they're kind of navigating these difficult couple of months, so they're great partners.
Question?
George, this one's for you. I know we can live in a world where it seems like data and facts don't matter. I'm gonna give you a softball here. Can you tell us a little bit about the data collection that you all did on the Duck River and how important that was for sort of raising awareness about that, the importance of that ecosystem to the state of Tennessee?
Sure. So the Duck River is full of federally listed endangered species, primarily freshwater mussels. And we had a really bad drought. We're still in a drought in that watershed, but it got kind of to a crisis phase in August and September. So we did a couple of things in terms of data gathering. One of our legal assistants began tracking the water levels in the river as reflected by USGS gauges to kind of show historically, how low the river was getting as compared to its prior levels. And she was graphing those things for us so that we could really visually demonstrate how serious it was. And we also hired a leading mussel biologist to go to the river and collect dead federally listed endangered mussels. And there were hundreds and hundreds of these dead animals that this expert found. And he prepared a detailed report, which we then shared with all the stakeholders up and down the river and the media. And his data gathering, I think, helped spark a lot of the public coverage about the drought and what it was doing. So, data can inform public conversation for sure.
One of you referenced citizen data. How much is that coming into play? Obviously, expert data, very powerful, but everyone has an iPhone. And they can take pictures and they can measure. Is that playing a role yet, or is it sort of not reliable enough to be useful?
I haven't used citizen data yet, so I don't know that I have the best answer for your question.
Well, I mean, I think all regulatory entities are struggling with that question.
I'll say that, the 2,500 complaints we received in 2024, those were from neighbors calling saying, this is what I saw, this is the picture we took. So, just like Metro codes, if you call or if you send them something and say, here's a picture of my neighbor's fence, or, whatever the issue may be, that's helpful to government because, we can't be everywhere all the time. A lot of people happy, but, so we need the help of the eyes and ears of the public to what's going on.
Yeah, and I will add that TDEC has a very good data viewer where, in terms of water quality, if you want to see what's going on with the permit, whether people are complaining, that sort of thing. So that's a type of data that's very helpful.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give each of you a chance to wrap up. If we have one very quick question.
Quick question that's been waiting.
To the panel, other than education, what can be done to reduce non-point source nutrient pollution? Nutrient pollution is a huge problem. It affects biodiversity, it can even affect human health.
Right.
But what do we do about it, including agriculture?
Yeah, Mekayle, what works with farmers?
Soil health practices are actually, there's a lot of adoption of that among Tennessee farmers. Maybe the highest rates in the country. And so what that does is it puts a lot of organic matter back into the soil. So when the rain falls, it's absorbed into the water. So the fertilizers are not sheet flowing across the farm fields into the creeks. So that's one thing, we have to find out what they want to do. We could say increase the size of your riparian buffers, but then that goes into their fields and cuts into their profitability. So we have to find sort of that sweet spot of what we want them to do and what they want to do. And so what we're doing now is, managed grazing, so they're moving, the cows are moving to a lot of different fields and not overgrazing, and soil health practices.
We did a study years ago, Environmental Law Institute, and one of the things that we found in the agricultural space was that it was the messenger that mattered, not to in any way denigrate your role, but what seemed to matter was if a neighbor, a farmer, said, I did this and it worked and it wasn't that costly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so you find the one farmer, so I'm just talking about Caroline's work now. She finds the one farmer who all the other farmers are gonna listen to. She gets that farmer to do a practice, and then she gets that farmer to teach all his neighbors.
This has been great, and I want to give you each a chance to sort of crystallize or distill what you've already said. Just by sort of closing with thoughts on what are the greatest barriers we're facing in terms of advancing water policy, and also what are the opportunities. And you've touched on a lot of this, but I think it always helps to try to distill it at the end.
Well, in Tennessee, we sort of have this legacy of being efficient. We have a balanced budget. We have a low tax. We have a healthy rainy day fund. And so we can't do it alone. There is a lot of pressure for us. The state's growing and we're trying to do so much. And so I guess my message would be thank you for caring. Thank you for adding manpower to this cause. And we couldn't do it without our partners. So just thank you to Vanderbilt and to the NGO community for really helping so much. So thanks.
I would just say that I grew up in a water scarce environment, and so I think people who grew up with all this abundance around you, you don't really realize how great it is to be in a place that has abundant fresh water. It's amazing to not always have that fear that you're gonna run out of water. And so, I think if we could just realize what a great gift the fresh water that we have is and take care of it before we lose it, and everything that water supports, it's amazing.
I would just encourage people to do two things. One is, as the gentleman suggested, get to know your local representatives. And secondly, plant trees or give money to great groups like Houghton or Contact and let them plant some trees. I think that's the best thing we could do.
Well, thank you so much, and I think that the one sentence that sticks with me is, it all ends up in the water. And so thank you so much for sharing your insights and taking the time today. And I'm sorry, one other thing, Anne has instructed me to say we are going to have a 10-minute break, and there are cookies and coffee. Thank you so much.